Awesome. So welcome to General Catalyst, Harry.
It's good to be here.
Glad to have you. This is, I guess, probably our 7th or 8th chat at GC New York. We decided to take a stab at renaming this series. We were previously calling it Between Two ZZs, which was the name of a bush, which was supposed to reference the Zach Galifianakis Between Two Ferns session, but people didn't understand what ZZs are and may not have even seen the bushes. So we're calling it Venturing. Today we'll be venturing with Harry Heymann. Harry has been sort of an OG in the New York ecosystem, you could say now, for, or maybe almost an OG for, you know.
I don't really know when you started.
Since the mid-aughts.
Moved here in 2004.
Google. Yeah, so Google, Foursquare, most recently HomeTeam, and now I guess as your LinkedIn bio says, you're like professionally on the beach trying to figure out what.
I haven't had a more than 2 weeks vacation in over a decade, so I'm taking a little time.
Good, enjoy. We hope you enjoy it. So I have to confess, I had a really funny dream last night. I don't know why I had a lot of dreams last night, but one of the segments of the dream was I was getting ready to sit down with you for the interview. For some reason, we were in the mountains, and we were waiting on a random airstrip, and I was like walking up to you, you know, sort of saying, hey, we got to get ready for the chat. And you were wearing a stormtrooper outfit, and you had your helmet off. So,
well, this is a little bizarre.
So I'm really glad to see you here in the flesh. And anyway, we can get started. So, you know, if you go back to 2004, had Google already opened their big Port Authority building?
No, when I first moved here, they were still in their office at 1440 Broadway, which just wasn't quite the original Google New York office, but it was more or less the original.
And how many people were there, would you say?
You know, on the engineering team, I'm going to say something on the order of like 50. That's plus or minus a little bit. There were a lot of salespeople that I didn't really necessarily know. But it was enough engineers where I didn't necessarily know everybody.
Yep.
But when you walk down the hall, all the faces look, you know, pretty familiar.
And
everybody still reported into Craig Neville Manning. So, you know, it couldn't have been too big, even with Google's extremely high fan-out management structure from the time.
And had Google gone public at that point already?
No, I started in April or May, and then they went public in August.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that must have been a pretty seismic event for you in the beginning of your career.
I mean, on one hand, you would think so, but you know, how old was I at the time? If it was 2004, I was like 25.
Yeah.
And you know, I'd only been at Google for a couple of months, so it really didn't occur to me how big of a deal it was at the time. Like in hindsight, it was obviously a big deal, but it's not like I had been at Google for 2 or 3 years and we had been working up to this. Like I was just the new guy. Like on the day it went public, I'm sure I came in and did the same work that I did the day before or the day after.
I'm sure that's what they wanted you to do.
Yeah.
Did Google feel like a wildly special and important company at the time? You know, or you know, you think about all of the companies today that you know are truly iconic.
Yeah.
And you sort of rewind now almost 15 years.
Yeah.
It's hard to know exactly the way the magic felt at the time.
You know, it's always a little hard to imagine in your head, like, what exactly did something feel like 15 years ago? But I will say, you know, Google wasn't the Google it is today, you know, a $600 billion, you know, behemoth. But it was clear that Google was a big deal. You know, every single person I knew used it as a search engine. Gmail had recently launched, so almost all of my friends were starting to use Gmail as their personal email address. I can't remember exactly when Google Maps launched, but it was around that time.
So when you said at Thanksgiving, hey, Grandma, I work at Google, Grandma knew what Google was.
Yeah, Grandma knew what Google was. Like, it was clear that I was going to like a, you know, a big, exciting company that was going to be good for my career.
That's awesome. So how did you get roped into the Foursquare narrative? And that was probably your first foray into like kind of the organically New York tech community.
Sure.
How did that happen?
Yeah, so I knew Dennis Crowley, actually socially, even before he sold Dodgeball to Google. Kind of through friends of friends. Like we weren't best friends, but we knew each other a little bit. And I was a Dodgeball user actually. For those that don't know, Dodgeball was kind of a precursor to Foursquare. I like to say as MS-DOS is to Windows, Dodgeball is to Foursquare. It was location-based networking, but over SMS. You just had that text interface. So I was a user. And then actually at work one day, I heard that Google was actually thinking about buying Dodgeball. And that was pretty exciting. So I saw him out at a bar at some point the next week, and I'm like, hey, I heard this was going to happen.
Like, you were playing,
and immediately he was like, shh, don't tell anybody that. You can't tell anybody. You're going to like screw the deal if we like violate our talk about it too much. But that obviously went through, and then I was excited enough about it that I actually wanted to work on Dodgeball because I just loved the product. So I talked to my manager at Google, and I said, hey, I'd like to switch teams. And it was a little bit of a long process, but eventually I switched over and I worked on Dodgeball at Google as kind of the founding engineer there for a couple of years. And then that obviously played its course. It was kind of a product a little bit before its time. So Dennis and Alex ended up leaving Google. And then when Dodgeball ended up getting shut down and Dennis started rebuilding Foursquare, it was a pretty easy fit to jump ship. I'd actually, I'd been at Google 5 years at that point. I'd already been kind of looking around, wanting to go somewhere smaller. Nothing had really piqued my interest yet, and that was, pretty much a no-brainer, to be honest.
Was it clear to you guys that the next iteration of Dodgeball would work?
It was not clear to me at all. In fact, I tried to talk Dennis out of doing something like Foursquare. I was like, hey, you did this product once, why didn't you do something else? But to his credit, he was so passionate, about that space and that sort of technology that he really stuck with it. I will say that after it launched, it was in beta for about 6 months among a group of maybe a couple hundred people in New York. But when they launched publicly at South by Southwest in 2009 and started catching on pretty quick, then it was clear that like, this was actually a pretty good decision on his part.
So one of the things that I've always been struck by is from the very early days of Foursquare, you guys built a very strong engineering team.
Thank you.
One of the reasons why I know it's remarkable is because it was impossible for people like us to pull people out of Foursquare for a long period of time. And since there's been some splintering of the mafia, so to speak, and people have gone on, like yourself, to go do really interesting things in the ecosystem. So I guess to start, I'm curious, how did you do that? I mean, how did that start, and did you even know it was happening when you were working on it?
I think I knew that it was happening. And while I'll certainly take a little bit of the credit, a lot of it was I really had the wind at my back as an engineering leader. I had a lot of kind of forces in my favor. And a lot of them aren't necessarily obvious. Some of the obvious ones are that we had, a pretty successful product out in the world. But then also, just as importantly, it was a product that, 20, 30 something engineers were actually using personally. It's a lot easier to get people excited about a product that they use on their phone every day versus, some sort of back office, B2B application that can be really valuable, but you aren't personally going to use. The fact that people were using it personally was really exciting. Also the fact that there was a lot of really interesting technology problems to work on. It was a product that had millions of users, so there were kind of scale, kind of database back-end kind of issues that were really interesting. It was also a search product. Explore in Foursquare is a very interesting search product, so you get that kind of like data science, machine learning kind of background that you're really interested in.
Battery consumption, battery life.
Then it's a mobile product, so you have all kinds of interesting things on the phone that were even harder in 2009, 2010 than they are today, whether it's something like battery life or something just something as simple as checking in. Your phone, has a geocode on it, but it's not quite as accurate as you might think. And, I might try to check in here in General Catalyst on the 6th floor, but my phone doesn't necessarily know I'm on the 6th floor versus whatever's, down in the basement. So, there were a lot of, really, really interesting, technology problems to bite on that were very easy to understand from the outside as well, that we didn't have to sell, very hard. Also, I think that, we pulled a lot of people out of Google. And
Google West Coast or all Google New York, or how did that? For
the most part, it started, Foursquare obviously was here in New York, so it started with Google East Coast, but we did actually open an office in San Francisco as well. So we pulled a few people out of the West Coast office as well. And I really think our timing was pretty good there. You had kind of a wave of Googlers who had, maybe started around the IPO or a year or two after the IPO. And then, people hit that 4 or 5 year mark,
right.
In their tenure at a job. And, some people stay forever, but some people are like, hey, it's time to do what's next.
Yep.
So we were able to catch a lot of people at the right timing in their career to think about, doing what's next. So they come out of the big company where they made
sure.
the big money. Maybe they had saved a little bit. They wanted to take more risk in their career. Also, it was just easy. I'd come out of Google. Dennis had been there for a while. So we had a lot of social connections. It's always easier to hire people that you know personally. And then it's kind of like pulling on a thread. You hire one person, and then they hire their friend, and then they hire their friend, and all of a sudden you've pulled out kind of 10 people that were this pre-existing group.
And we
had a lot of success.
Was the culture, I know it from the outside in, but from the inside out, was it very different from Google's engineering culture, or because of the DNA that you kind of spliced together?
I would say it had a lot of Google DNA in it. So it was familiar for Google engineers coming in as well. We did snippets, we did code reviews. It was a similar style of, really caring about high quality engineering. Google really sets the standard for being a company that not only produces good products, but the technical underpinnings are really, world class as well. And we really tried to do that at Foursquare as well. So it was very appealing for kind of engineers.
And did you, how did you protect it? So you're 5 engineers, you're 10 engineers, you get to 50 engineers. Right. What did you do to nurture it, and what did you do to develop it into something that was uniquely Foursquare? Because at a certain point you wind up...
Yeah, so it definitely had to, it wasn't, it had a lot of Google DNA, but it had some other DNA as well. The other DNA was kind of a sense of fun and playfulness. Foursquare is a game. Think about the video games that you can play and take that kind of fun and put it into a mobile app. It was also, it has that startup DNA, like we worked really hard, we worked late. It had the DNA of like, hey, lots of users are signing up every day, and if we don't fix things fast enough, the whole thing is going to break, which is going to be terrifying and the most embarrassing thing in our lives. So, but as for protecting it, again, I had the wind at my back. Like, we had big problems that really needed to be solved, and they were good problems. They were the problems of success. And that's. People want to work at a successful company that has problems that need to be solved, to continue the success of that company. So people just, got in deep with whatever part, whether they were writing the mobile app, whether they were working on the back end, whether they were working on these data science problems. They just took on these big, meaty problems that were really important to the company and just worked really hard on them. And, like you said, for those first couple of years, we really didn't lose anybody, that was...
Was it kind of a joke? Like, was it like, oh, here they come, like the...
I mean, honestly, we didn't even really think about it. Like, it didn't even rise to the level of a joke. Amazing. Like, I'm sure people got emails from recruiters, but they just deleted them and moved on, because what they were working on was so obviously what they should have been working on at that point in their career that, it just worked out really well. I think that a lot of startups, you can have great planning and you can have great management, but you need a little of that spark and luck where the right things come together at the right time, and we were definitely lucky enough to have that.
That's great. Yeah, and it was also at a time when there was less competition.
That's totally true.
In the ecosystem.
It was the early days of the New York startup scene, and like, in 2011, if you were going to work at a startup in New York, like, there weren't a ton of options. So that made it easier as well. It was frankly, it was easier to recruit in New York, even though the pool of talent is smaller than it was, out in California, where it's obviously a much bigger talent pool, but there's also, the startup ecosystem is, 10 times bigger, 20 times bigger, whatever you want to call it.
And as you transition into HomeTeam,
right?
Like, how was your experience different, and how did you try to sort of, because you were not on the founding team of HomeTeam.
So HomeTeam was really an entirely different experience for me than Foursquare, which was actually great. I enjoyed it a lot. I was looking for something different. It was different.
Maybe tell people what HomeTeam is.
HomeTeam is an elder care company where technology is very important, but technology is not the core product. At Foursquare, you're selling an app on the phone. At HomeTeam, we were selling care for your mother or grandmother, aunt or uncle, or something like that. And but to do that at scale, you need technology to do it right. So when I joined HomeTeam, they had raised their Series A. They had $2 million in the bank. There was a pre-existing engineering team of 5 folks. The whole company was 25 or 30, something like that. They had a pretty decent customer base. It was growing. So it was joining when the thing was already moving, rather than in like the very early days. So I had to kind of remold what I had rather than building it from scratch, which has advantages and disadvantages. You know, hey, I already have 5 engineers. I don't literally have to start from zero.
But that was more of a missionary sale as sort of an engineering leader. That was like, hey, we help people in this very tangible way. You probably had a family member who was sick, and was it that type of sell?
Yeah, the mission-driven nature of the company was definitely a little different. You know, I would tell people a story at HomeTeam that I think that in a lot of ways I did the best work of my life at Foursquare to date. But at the end of the day, what was I doing? I was helping a yuppie find a better cocktail after work, which is a fine thing to do. I'm a little bit of a yuppie. I'd like a great cocktail. But at HomeTeam, I got to spend 2 years really, changing the lives of older adults in a more meaningful way. At HomeTeam, the company gets like emails and phone calls on a weekly basis that will just like, make your heart melt about how we were changing people's lives. And that is really powerful to a lot of people. And I think that, most of the people at HomeTeam, and certainly most of the people that I hired on the engineering team, one of the major reasons was because it was something they cared about. And in most cases, actually had personal experiences, with trying to take care of a parent or a grandparent or something like that, realizing how hard it is to do well, and, really wanting to improve the industry.
This is sort of like the Jerry Maguire version of impact, which is, he said in the movie, or Jerry Maguire, it's like fewer clients, bigger impact. And this is like fewer customers.
HomeTeam is never going to have well, I mean maybe one day, but can be a very very successful company without having millions of clients. With like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of clients would be a multi-billion-dollar company for HomeTeam. So it's just a different kind of operation.
So one of the topics that you're very passionate about, and I'm sure you've carried through and developed in your career, is this kind of concept that we've talked about, which is soft engineering management, which is basically how you get the most out of your employees, specifically your engineers, through their career. And it's not about what technology you use or what, whether you use Pivotal Track or Jira, whatever it may be, but it's really about, looking into someone's soul maybe and getting the most
management is people.
So,
especially, as a leader, once you get beyond a certain scale. At the beginning, maybe you're writing code, you're making some big kind of technology architecture choices. At the medium stage, maybe you're still doing a lot of code review, you're building like the technical building blocks, but eventually you hire people that are doing, most if not all of that for you, and then it's all people all the time. So, it's how can you get the most out of your people. And it's funny, I made some notes on my phone last night because I knew we were going to have this conversation. And it's something that's hard to talk about because you end up with a lot of platitudes that sound like, well, everybody knows that. Like, ask people a lot of questions, talk to them about their goals, think about what they want to do next in their career. And this stuff, in some ways sounds obvious, but it turns out that doing it well can actually be really tricky. And I think that, one of the biggest reasons that is because, everyone is different. Your career goals are different from his career goals, which are different from her career goals. Your motivations are different. What gets you excited is different. And as a manager, it's my job to really treat everyone, as an individual and treat them, in some cases, actually very, very differently in how I manage them. And that can come off sometimes as kind of almost fake or not authentic. People always talk about authentic leadership. You should always be yourself. But what you need is different from what someone over here needs. So I should act differently with you than I should act with her. And that can feel kind of weird. But it's something I've gotten used to.
So do you have a system that you would look to deploy to a new company to not necessarily be prescriptive at the individual level, but that would basically be a framework.
There's a couple of simple things that I always try to do. I'm a big believer in one-on-ones. As are essentially all competent leaders, in my opinion. The one-on-ones are the most important meetings I have.
How long are they for you?
Half an hour for more junior people, an hour for more senior people. Either every week or every other week. They should be long enough to be substantive. If you're getting in there and you're getting in and out in 15 minutes and you're just talking about status, like you're not really doing your best work. You're just kind of turning the crank. one-on-ones should take a while because, it can take a while for people to really kind of open up about what they really care about.
Yep.
You don't talk about, your real frustrations in the first 2 minutes of a conversation.
Right.
You gotta ease into that sort of thing. So, one-on-ones that take a while. I do kind of share docs for a lot of people. A shared Google Doc
on
where
an
you kind of
individual
keep
basis.
notes. Yeah.
So we have a shared.
We
doc.
have a shared doc. I have a shared doc with Bob over here and Alice over here,
Yeah.
and kind of keep notes from time to time so you don't forget things.
And these are
so
shared sort of memorials of your one-on-ones, of sort of the prep and the follow-up and all that stuff. Got it.
Yeah. And it's not like, it doesn't need to be an agenda that goes back, forever. Just 1 or 2 pages, you add stuff, you delete stuff, whatever is the most important thing at the time. I really try to put a lot on the people that report to me. Like I tell them that the one-on-one is their meeting.
Right.
We can talk about literally anything they want to talk about in the meeting. I don't get to set the direction. I only get to kind of nudge it a little bit. And, I found that the best people will really, latch onto that. And because the best people are going to have things that they want to talk about. Someone who walks in and they're like, I don't know, I'm just doing my job. I wrote some code last week. I'll write some more this week.
Right.
Can be great for a while, but if people are really great, they're going to have bigger questions about the company. They're going to have bigger questions about their career. They're going to have bigger questions about the product, and they're going to bring things to that meeting.
So when you see someone that is doing work that you feel is very much below their potential, but you see tremendous potential in someone, how do you sort of get out the paddles and really like shock them into the next?
So I'm not really a big believer in the whip most of the time, and in a weird way I'm not a big believer in the carrot either. Like it's not like, oh, if you work twice as hard you get the $20,000 raise or something like that. I really try to think about that person as an individual and try to get inside their head and be like, what is it that is causing Bob to not, achieve his potential? Is it that he's bored? Is it that he's overwhelmed? Is it that he doesn't have clear goals? Is it that he doesn't like his colleagues? It can be a lot of different things. I'll ask questions. I'm a big believer in being Socratic. I try to ask, for every statement that I give someone, I want to ask a question. I'm a big believer in asking questions that I don't know the answer to. A lot of people, especially as they advance in their career and get kind of better, you start to live in this world where you kind of know the answer to almost everything. And it can get kind of scary to run into something where you don't know the answer, so you shy away from it. But I'm like, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to be like, Bob, like, I see that you should roll into work at like 10:30, every day. And it's not like you're one of these guys that like works till 8 o'clock at night. Like, what's going on? What's up with that? And not in like a scary way, and kind of a cool, kind of friendly way. And I try to just, be curious, and because it can be fascinating and really kind of interesting and as exciting as a manager. Because if you don't ask those questions, then you're not really learning anything, and you don't figure out how to pull it out of them.
So I guess maybe the opposite.
I don't know whether I've really answered your question or not. I'm rambling around.
No. I mean, that's sort of what we do here, including listening to the construction on the street.
New York City.
I guess maybe also just thinking about it from the other perspective. I mean, you have somebody that's performing really well. You have a great cadence in your sort of one-on-one sessions with somebody. How do you use people, or maybe not, as an example and really get them to lift up their peers? We talk about the Foursquare culture as being really exemplary. I mean, how did you do that? How did you guys lift each other up and less of a sort of manager?
So first off, I think that people are doing great. Like, I just need to stay out of the way. Like, it's going to be obvious, that they're doing great work, and it's going to be obvious that they're an example, to the rest of the organization. Whether, Kushal, like, one of the great engineers that we had at Foursquare, like, everybody loved him, and everyone, knew that he did awesome work. But there would be times in one-on-ones where, I would be talking to a specific engineer and be like, at least, where you are in your career is great, but the next step in your career, just so you kind of know what it looks like, is this person over here. And I try to make those examples, pretty specific. Like, some people go this way, some people go this way. Like, this is who you should kind of look at and act like. I always like to think about the next step up for someone in their career, because it can get easy to get caught in that trap of like, oh, this person is performing great. I just need them to keep doing the same thing for the next year. And to some degree that can be true, but you don't want them to stagnate. So you need to think like, well, they're doing great, but what does better look like? And the way you think about what better look like is the next step up.
And can you do that with people outside of the company as well? Or
absolutely.
How does that work?
Yeah. That can be a little bit harder because someone outside of the company you can't necessarily go talk to, or you can't necessarily know as much about them. But you could certainly kind of view them from afar. Though I am also a huge believer in peer mentoring, not necessarily within a company, but also outside of a company. Some of the best mentoring that I've received is I have a peer mentoring group of other kind of VPNs, like CTO types. We have a Slack channel, and just talking to people that are doing, it's called the Dinner Club. Helen kind of set it up. But some of the, the best mentoring comes from people that are having the same problems you're having, working through the same issues you're working through, and just understanding that, the things I'm screwing up, it's not necessarily because I'm a moron. Like, everybody has these problems.
Plugging your subordinates into? You're saying, hey,
I have a little bit. Frankly, not as much as I probably should have, but I think it can be a really powerful thing to do.
We only have a few more minutes. I just want to switch gears into the beach, which is what you're doing now.
Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically, this does not look like a beach.
No.
The jackhammers on the beach.
A little dreary today.
So it sounds like you're sort of, there's an open request on your LinkedIn profile for podcasts, books, inspiration, things that one enjoys while on the beach. What have you found? What's inspiring you right now as you sort of enjoy this moment of reprieve?
I do listen to a couple of sports podcasts. I'm trying to get back into reading a little bit, but to be honest, my last day at HomeTeam was the end of March, so it hasn't even been a month yet, and I have a 2-year-old child.
Startup at home.
I've been doing a lot of nothing for the last
great.
month. As I said, I haven't taken time off in quite some time. I went from Google to Foursquare. I took a weekend off in between because Foursquare was blowing up and I really needed me. I took a weekend off in between Foursquare and HomeTeam because I needed to really get HomeTeam going before I had a kid. So it's been a while since I haven't been working full time, and I was pretty tired. So
you're sleeping.
As much as I'm looking around for a little inspiration, I'm sleeping. I'm watching some TV.
Good.
It's not the most exciting thing in the world. But it's been awesome, to be honest. My wife actually last night, it's our anniversary today, coincidentally.
Oh, congratulations.
And she was like, I like unemployed, Harry. You're so much more relaxed.
It's great.
So I'm enjoying it for the time being, but I imagine it's probably not going to last too long, so I'm trying to savor it.
Good. Well, we'll have to share a podcast, Rex, later. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sounds great. It's good to be here.
Yeah.